My name is Rebecca Watson, 32 years old, standing in the swirling snow with arms full of carefully wrapped presents. After 3 years away, I was finally home for Christmas, heart pounding with hope that this year would be different. When my sister Eleanor opened the door, I expected at least a reluctant welcome. Instead, she rolled her eyes and said those words that shattered everything. "We do not want you here. If you have ever felt the sting of family rejection, stick around." Let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if family drama hits close to home, and let me tell you how one Christmas changed everything. I have spent the last 5 years building my life in Seattle, working my way up to senior software developer at a tech company that most people would recognize. My apartment overlooking Puget Sound, my rescue dog Cooper, my small but tight circle of friends. I had created a good life for myself, but there was always this Rebecca-shaped hole where my family should have been. Growing up in Boston, Eleanor and I were inseparable despite being 3 years apart. We shared a bedroom with twin beds pushed together because I was afraid of the dark and she never complained. We built snow forts in winter, chased fireflies in summer, and defended each other fiercely at school. Our parents, Margaret and Thomas, created what I thought was the perfect family. Weekend trips to Cape Cod game nights that dissolved into laughter and traditions that felt unbreakable. Until they broke. I was 20 when Dad's construction business failed during the recession. The financial strain was immediate and devastating. 6 months later, Mom announced she wanted a divorce. The family imploded spectacularly with battle lines drawn before I even understood what was happening. Mom stayed in the family home with Eleanor, who was 19 and attending community college. Dad moved into a depressing one-bedroom apartment across town. I was away at MIT watching my family disintegrate through tearful phone calls and tense weekend visits. The real divide came when Dad called me voice-breaking, saying he could not afford to help with my tuition anymore. I made what seemed like the only decision possible at the time. I would work extra jobs, take out more loans, and help Dad get back on his feet. I sent him money from my campus jobs eating ramen so he could make rent. Eleanor was furious. "You betrayed Mom," she said during one particularly brutal phone call. "After everything she sacrificed for us, you choose him. He drove the family into the ground with his terrible business decisions, and now you are bankrolling him." I tried to explain that I was not choosing sides, that Dad was struggling while Mom at least had the house and her teaching job, but Eleanor saw everything in black and white. In her mind, I had made my choice, and it was not them. Mom's disappointment was quieter but just as painful. "I thought I raised you to be loyal," she said once, and those words haunted me for years. The first Christmas after the divorce, I split the day, morning with Dad, evening with Mom and Eleanor. It was awkward and tense, with Eleanor barely speaking to me at dinner. The second Christmas, Eleanor told Mom she would not come if I was there. Mom called me in tears, asking if I would mind coming the day after instead. I agreed, but something broke inside me that day. Over the next few years, I tried everything to repair things. I sent birthday gifts that went unacknowledged. I called on holidays and got short, cold responses. I flew home for Eleanor's college graduation and sat alone, waving to my family from across the auditorium, never invited to the celebration dinner afterward. When Eleanor got married 4 years ago, I received a text message, not even a proper invitation, telling me the date but making it clear I was not welcome at the reception to keep the peace. I sent an expensive gift from their registry anyway. The thank you card came from her husband Ryan, not her. Meanwhile, my relationship with Dad stabilized. He got back on his feet, eventually finding work with a former competitor and slowly rebuilding his life. We spoke weekly, and I visited him when I could, though these visits never included the rest of the family. Last year, something shifted my perspective completely. My mentor and friend Diane was diagnosed with aggressive cancer and died within 3 months. At her memorial service, her estranged daughter gave a heartbreaking speech about all the years they had lost to a petty disagreement neither could even fully remember. Standing there listening, I made a decision. I would not let another year pass without trying to heal my family. I started with small gestures, more frequent calls to Mom, genuine questions about Eleanor's life, pictures of Cooper and my apartment. Mom began to thaw, slightly responding with longer conversations and even a few photos of her garden and Eleanor's new house. When she hesitantly mentioned Christmas dinner this year, asking if I would consider coming, it felt like the door was finally cracking open. I requested time off work months in advance. I searched for the perfect gifts: a handcrafted scarf for Mom from her favorite artist, a rare first edition book for my literary uncle, frank, thoughtful presents for my cousins and aunt. For Eleanor, I spent weeks tracking down a porcelain doll that matched one she had loved and broken as a child. I remembered how she had cried for days, and thought maybe, just maybe, this might bridge the gap between us. My flight from Seattle to Boston was delayed twice due to the snowstorm. I spent 7 hours in the airport watching families reunite with hugs and tears while I sat alone, alternating between hope and anxiety. When we finally landed at 11:30 at night on Christmas Eve, I rented the last available car and drove through the blizzard to my hotel, determined not to let anything stop me. Boston looked like a snow globe the next morning. Familiar streets transformed into white tunnels between snowbanks. I drove past our old elementary school, the ice cream shop where we celebrated every report card, the park where Dad taught us both to ride bikes. Each landmark sparked memories that made my chest tight with longing for what we had lost. I texted Mom that I would arrive at 4 as requested. She responded with a single thumbs-up emoji, not exactly warm but not rejection either. I spent the day preparing myself emotionally, practicing responses to potential cold shoulders, reminding myself that healing takes time. By 3:30, my rental car was packed with presents, and I was as ready as I would ever be to face my family. The snow had picked up again as I navigated the familiar turns to my childhood home. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the fat, wet flakes, and my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Not just from the treacherous roads, but from the anxiety coiling tighter in my stomach with each passing mile. I parked across the street since the driveway was full, a good sign, I thought. The whole family must be there. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Frank, my cousins, Stephanie and Matthew, probably Matthew's wife Allison, and their 2-year-old son, I had only seen in Facebook photos. Maybe even Eleanor's husband Ryan, who I had met exactly once, briefly at a funeral. The walk from the car was treacherous, the sidewalk hidden under 8 inches of snow. I balanced the stack of presents, carefully grateful that I had thought to wear boots with good traction. Christmas lights twinkled from the eaves of the colonial-style house where I had grown up, and warmth spilled from the windows into the gray evening. I could see the outline of the Christmas tree in the front window, decorated with the mismatched ornaments we had collected over decades. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat as I climbed the familiar front steps. Through the door I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses. The Christmas playlist Mom had used since we were kids provided a soundtrack of familiar carols. I took a deep breath, shifted the packages in my arms, and rang the doorbell. The laughter inside dimmed slightly. Footsteps approached, and I straightened my shoulders, plastered on my most hopeful smile. The door swung open. Eleanor stood there, her blonde hair longer than I remembered, wearing a green sweater that matched her eyes that immediately narrowed upon seeing me. The smile slid from my face as I registered her expression, not surprise, not reluctance, but disgust. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut through the howling wind. "Mom invited me," I said, confusion making my voice small, "for Christmas dinner." Eleanor leaned against the doorframe, blocking my view inside. "Right. Of course she did." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Look, we do not want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday." The words hit like physical blows. My arms tightened around the packages, as if they could shield me from the verbal attack. Over Eleanor's shoulder, I caught a glimpse of the dining room. The big table was extended to its full length, covered with the lace tablecloth that had been my grandmother's. Everyone was there. Mom at the head of the table, Aunt Patricia, beside her Uncle Frank carving what looked like a perfect turkey. My cousins were laughing about something, glasses of wine in hand. A perfect family Christmas scene with no place set for me. "But Mom said." I started, my voice cracking. Mom was being nice. Eleanor cut me off. She did not think you would actually show up. Nobody wants to deal with your drama today, Rebecca. We are having a nice time. Just go. I stood there, snowflakes gathering on my eyelashes, melting and mixing with the tears I refused to let fall. The warmth from the house brushed against my face, so close yet completely inaccessible. Got it, I managed to say the words barely audible. I turned away before she could see me break. Merry Christmas, she called sarcastically as she closed the door behind me. I stumbled back down the steps, nearly slipping on the icy concrete. The stack of presents felt impossibly heavy now. I made it back to my rental car and collapsed into the driver's seat, the gifts tumbling onto the passenger side. Only then did I allow myself to break down, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel, as silent sobs shook my body. Through the windshield, I could see the house glowing with warmth and life, the family I had lost continuing their celebration without a second thought for the daughter and sister shivering in a car outside. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I wiped my eyes and started the engine. The car's thermometer read 17 degrees and the snow was coming down harder. I had nowhere to go. My hotel room from the previous night had already been rented to another guest. I had checked out that morning, confident I would be staying with family. I called every hotel in a 20-mile radius. "We're completely booked for the holiday," was the universal response. One sympathetic desk clerk suggested trying Airbnb, but a quick search showed nothing available on such short notice. I sat in the idling car, watching the windows fog up, obscuring my view of the house. Part of me wanted to storm back up those steps, force my way inside, demand an explanation from my mother. Had she really not expected me to come, after I had confirmed multiple times, after I had flown 3,000 miles through a snowstorm? But the image of Eleanor's face, the casual cruelty of her dismissal, kept me frozen in place. The humiliation was too raw, too complete. I could not face that table of laughing relatives who apparently did not want me there. Instead, I drove to a nearby Starbucks, one of the few places open on Christmas Day. I ordered the largest hot chocolate they had, and sat in the corner, surrounded by the forced cheer of holiday decorations and the sympathetic glances of the baristas, who clearly recognized someone having a terrible Christmas. I scrolled through my phone, looking at the text exchange with Mom from just that morning. "Looking forward to seeing you at 4," I had written. "See you then," she had replied. No ambiguity, no suggestion that I should reconsider, just a simple confirmation that now felt like a cruel joke. As I sat there, my phone remained silent. No call from Mom wondering where I was, no text asking if I was running late, nothing. It was as if I had never been expected in the first place. The realization settled over me like the snow outside, heavy, cold, and suffocating. They really did not want me there. Not just Eleanor, but all of them. 3 years of attempted reconciliation, of olive branches extended of hope, carefully nurtured, all for nothing. As I sat in that Starbucks, fingers wrapped around a cooling hot chocolate, memories crashed over me in relentless waves. The beginning of the end had been so much more complicated than a simple taking of sides after the divorce. Dad's construction company had been successful for 15 years before the housing market collapsed. He had 30 employees who counted on him, families who needed those paychecks. He took out second and third mortgages on our house to make payroll, maxed out credit cards to buy materials for jobs that would keep his workers employed. Mom begged him to scale back, to let people go, to save something for our family. He refused, certain the market would recover before it was too late. It did not. The day he filed for bankruptcy was the first time I ever saw my father cry. Mom did not comfort him. She took Eleanor shopping, leaving him sitting alone at the kitchen table with papers spread out before him. When they announced the divorce 6 months later, it surprised no one. What did surprise me was how quickly my mother moved on. Within weeks, she had changed her appearance, joined a book club, started dating. It was as if she had been planning her escape for years and was finally free. Dad, meanwhile, fell apart. He moved into an apartment that smelled like the previous tenants' cats. He worked odd jobs for cash. And he drank, not constantly, but enough that I worried every time the phone rang late at night. So yes, I helped him. I used my scholarship money for his rent sometimes. I worked extra shifts at the campus coffee shop to send him grocery money. I listened to him rage and cry and despair on the phone when he should have been asking about my classes or my friends or my life. Eleanor saw it differently. She watched Mom struggle to maintain the house on a teacher's salary. She resented that Dad had left her to clean up his financial mess while I was safely away at college. She was the one who had to watch Mom cry herself to sleep, who had to deal with creditors calling, who had to witness our mother trying to rebuild a life that had been shattered by what she saw as Dad's reckless decisions. "You have no idea what it is like here," she told me during one horrible fight. "You show up on holidays with your fancy MIT stories while Mom works 60-hour weeks. And you send money to Dad, the person who caused all this. How dare you?" I tried to make her understand that it was not that simple, that Dad was deeply depressed, that I feared what he might do if everyone abandoned him. But Eleanor could not or would not see it. To her, I had chosen the villain in the story. The summer after my junior year, things escalated beyond repair. Dad had finally found steady work with a former competitor, moved to a better apartment, and seemed to be stabilizing. I reduced my financial help, focusing instead on emotional support. I thought Eleanor might finally see that I had been right to stand by him. Instead, she exploded when I mentioned his improvement at a family dinner. "Oh, Saint Rebecca has saved the day again," she mocked. "Should we build a shrine to your dedication, your loyalty to the man who destroyed this family?" Mom said nothing, just pushed food around her plate. Her silence felt like agreement. "That is not fair," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Dad made mistakes, but he did not deliberately hurt anyone. He was trying to save jobs." "He was being stubborn and selfish," Eleanor shot back. "Just like you." I left that night and stayed with a high school friend for the remainder of my visit. From then on, every interaction was strained. Mom began to echo Eleanor's perspective, suggesting that my support of Dad was a direct attack on them. Holidays became battlegrounds, with each side tallying perceived slights and injustices. The final breaking point came when I graduated from MIT. Dad attended, beaming with pride. Mom and Eleanor said they could not get time off work, though. Facebook later showed me they had gone to New York that weekend for a Broadway show. The message was clear: my achievements meant nothing if they were connected to my relationship with my father. After that, I withdrew. The constant rejection was too painful. I took the job in Seattle partly because of the opportunity, but mostly because of the distance it would put between me and the ongoing family drama. 3,000 miles made it easier to pretend that we were just busy, not actively avoiding each other. Eleanor's wedding was the final confirmation that I had been excised from the family. The text message invitation was clearly sent as an afterthought, perhaps at the insistence of our mother or Eleanor's fiancé. "Wedding is the 12th of June at St. Mary's. No need to come to the reception, keeping it small and drama-free. No gifts necessary." I sent the KitchenAid mixer anyway with a heartfelt card. I received a generic thank you note signed by Ryan, not Eleanor. Mom called once awkwardly to tell me that the wedding had been beautiful. She did not mention my absence or express any regret about it. For 3 years, I built my life separate from them. I excelled at work, made new friends, adopted Cooper from a shelter, bought my condo with the view I had always dreamed of. On the surface, I was thriving. But holidays were spent with orphan groups of other stranded friends. Birthdays were celebrated with colleagues, and family photo frames remained empty on my shelves. When Diane died last year, something fundamental shifted in me. She had been my first boss in Seattle, becoming a mentor and eventually a dear friend. Her daughter Lisa arrived for the funeral, haunted by regret. "We wasted 15 years fighting about something that seems so trivial now," she told me, eyes red from crying. "I cannot get that time back. I cannot tell her I forgive her." That night, I looked at the last family photo taken before the divorce. We were at Cape Cod, sunburned and sandy, arms around each other and squinting into the sun. We looked happy. We had been happy. Could we ever find our way back to some version of that? I began the slow, careful work of reaching out. Not grand gestures or emotional confrontations, but small, consistent efforts. I sent Mom articles I thought she would enjoy. I commented positively on Eleanor's Instagram posts about her garden and home renovations. I remembered birthdays with thoughtful gifts rather than generic gift cards. At first, the responses were minimal, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, things thawed. Mom began to call occasionally brief conversations that carefully avoided any meaningful topics but at least re-established contact. Eleanor never called me directly, but she stopped blocking my comments on social media. Once she even responded to a compliment about her kitchen remodel with a simple thanks. When Mom mentioned Christmas dinner this year, it felt like a miracle. A chance to finally begin healing the wound that had festered for so long. I had allowed myself to hope to imagine a tentative reconciliation, perhaps even the beginning of a new relationship with my sister. Now, sitting alone in Starbucks on Christmas Day, that hope felt foolish, pathetic even. I had flown across the country, braved a blizzard, prepared thoughtful gifts, and rehearsed careful, non-confrontational conversation topics. And my sister had slammed the door in my face, while my family continued their meal, apparently not even expecting me to show up. I scrolled through my phone to Dad's number. We had spoken yesterday when I landed, but he had plans with his girlfriend Lisa for Christmas Day. They were driving to Vermont for a ski weekend, his first real vacation in years. I had been so happy for him, glad he had found someone kind and stable after so many years alone. My finger hovered over the call button. I did not want to ruin his day with my drama, but I had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. Swallowing my pride, I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. "Becca, Merry Christmas, sweetheart. How's the family gathering going?" The concern that immediately replaced his cheer when I could not speak through my tears told me everything I needed to know about true family loyalty. "Stay exactly where you are," Dad said, his voice tight with controlled anger after I had managed to choke out what happened. "I am coming to get you." "But Vermont," I protested weakly. "Your vacation with Lisa is not happening," he finished firmly. "Lisa understands. Family comes first." The decisiveness in his voice broke something in me, releasing a fresh wave of tears. Someone was choosing me. Someone thought I mattered enough to change plans to drive through a blizzard to put me first. "The roads are terrible," I said, wiping my eyes with a napkin. "It will take you over an hour to get here from your place." "Then I better leave now," he replied. "Just stay warm. I will text when I am close." I sat in that Starbucks for another hour, nursing my third hot chocolate as the baristas gave me increasingly concerned looks. Outside, the snow had slowed, but the temperature was dropping rapidly, ice forming on the edges of the windows. My phone remained silent except for Dad's occasional updates on his progress. Nothing from Mom, nothing from Eleanor, not even a text to ask if I had made it back to my non-existent hotel safely in the blizzard. Dad finally pulled up in his battered pickup truck, the same vehicle he had driven since I was in high school. He rushed inside, snow dusting his gray hair, and wrapped me in a bear hug before I could even stand up. "I am so sorry, Becca," he murmured into my hair. "So damn sorry." We gathered my things and trudged out to his truck. The drive to his apartment was slow and treacherous, but Dad's steady hands on the wheel reminded me of childhood trips during New England winters. He had always been the one to drive us to school in snowstorms, to take us sledding when the hills were perfect, to teach us how to drive on ice without panicking. His apartment was small but cozy, a far cry from the depressing place he had first moved to after the divorce. Photographs lined the walls, mostly of me at various ages, but also some from his childhood, his parents, his new life. A small Christmas tree sat in the corner, decorated with ornaments I recognized from our family collection. Beneath it were 2 wrapped presents with my name on them. "I was going to drop these by tomorrow," he explained, following my gaze, "before we left for Vermont." He made us both hot toddies, adding extra honey to mine the way he used to when I had sore throats as a teenager. We sat on his worn but comfortable couch, and for the first time I told him everything. The years of cold shoulders, Eleanor's increasing hostility, the wedding snub, and my recent hope that things were finally changing. Dad listened without interrupting, his face growing stonier with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "There is something you need to know," he finally said, staring into his mug. Something I should have told you years ago, but I did not want to come between you and your sister and mother more than I already had. My stomach tightened with apprehension. What is it? Eleanor has been lying to you, to all of us. He set his mug down and turned to face me fully. Those times you thought they were ignoring your calls and messages, many of them never happened. Those invitations you supposedly declined, some were never extended. Confusion washed over me. What are you talking about? 3 years ago, your mother called me furious because you had apparently told Eleanor you were too busy with your real family in Seattle to attend her wedding. I knew that could not be true. You were heartbroken about being excluded. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. And last Christmas, your mother mentioned how sad she was that you had declined their dinner invitation to stay with friends in Vancouver, but you told me you were not invited at all. I was not, I whispered, the implications starting to sink in. Eleanor has been manipulating the narrative for years. I suspected it, but I had no proof. And frankly, your mother wanted to believe her version because it was easier than admitting how badly the family had fractured. A cold clarity began to replace my confusion and hurt. So today, I would bet anything that your mother is sitting there right now thinking you changed your mind or had travel problems. I doubt she knows Eleanor turned you away. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. We need to call her. Dad nodded grimly. Put it on speaker. Mom answered on the fourth ring, her voice bright with forced cheer. Rebecca, where are you, honey? We've been waiting. Did your flight get delayed again? The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Mom, I was there. At the house. Eleanor answered the door and told me you did not want me there. That you only invited me to be nice but did not think I would actually come. Silence stretched across the line, broken only by Mom's suddenly rapid breathing. That is not possible, she finally said, her voice small. We have been waiting for you. I set a place at the table. I told everyone you were coming. Well, Eleanor apparently had other plans, Dad cut in, unable to keep the anger from his voice. She turned our daughter away in a blizzard, Margaret. On Christmas Day. Thomas' mom sounded confused now. What are you? Where are you, Rebecca? I am at Dad's apartment, I said, tears threatening again. I had nowhere else to go. No hotel rooms available. Eleanor told me to leave, that I was ruining your holiday. I saw everyone at the table. Mom. No one looked like they were waiting for me. The line went quiet again, but I could hear muffled voices in the background as if Mom had covered the phone with her hand. When she came back, her voice was shaking. Rebecca, I swear to you, I had no idea. Eleanor told us your flight was delayed until tonight, that you would be joining us for dessert. We were waiting. I promise we were waiting for you. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not just today, but years of miscommunications and deliberate sabotage suddenly realigned in my mind. How many opportunities for reconciliation had been derailed by Eleanor's manipulations? How many family events had I missed because of lies told on both sides? I am coming over there right now, Mom said suddenly, steel entering her voice. Thomas, bring Rebecca back to the house. This ends today. Dad looked at me questioningly. After a moment, I nodded. We will be there in 30 minutes, depending on the roads, he told Mom. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything. Why would she do this? I finally asked. What does Eleanor gain from keeping the family divided? Dad sighed heavily. Your sister has always measured herself against you, Becca. Your grades, your college scholarship, your career success. She sees all of it as a reflection of her own shortcomings. It started long before the divorce. But I never competed with her, I protested. I always looked up to her. I know that, he said gently, but Eleanor does not see it that way. And after the divorce, she found the perfect weapon. She could paint you as the disloyal daughter, the one who abandoned family. It gave her the moral high ground she always felt she lacked compared to you. The realization was devastating and clarifying at once. All these years I had thought I was being punished for supporting Dad. In reality, I was being systematically isolated because of jealousy so deep it had warped into something malicious. Dad and I gathered the presents from my car and loaded them into his truck. The drive back to my childhood home was tense. my emotions swinging wildly between anger, hurt, and a strange sense of vindication. I had not imagined the coldness. I had not been paranoid or oversensitive. The rejection had been real and deliberate, just not from the people I thought. As we pulled up to the house, I saw Mom standing on the porch wrapped in a heavy coat watching for us. Even from a distance, I could see she had been crying. Dad parked and turned to me. "Whatever happens in there, remember this, you did nothing wrong. Not during the divorce, not in the years since, and especially not today. You have always tried to love everyone even when they made it nearly impossible." I nodded, throat too tight for words. We gathered the presents once more and made our way up the now shoveled path to the front door. Mom rushed down the steps to meet us, throwing her arms around me with a desperation I had not felt from her in over a decade. "I am so sorry," she kept repeating. "I had no idea. I swear I had no idea." Over her shoulder, I could see the front door open. Eleanor stood there, her face pale, her husband Ryan behind her with a hand on her shoulder. From inside, I heard the murmur of confused relatives trying to piece together what was happening. Mom released me and turned toward the house, her expression hardening as she looked at Eleanor. "We are all going to sit down," she said in the no-nonsense voice I remembered from childhood transgressions. "And we are going to get to the truth. All of it. Right now." Dad's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "Ready?" he asked quietly. I took a deep breath of the frigid air, feeling the snow crunch beneath my boots as I took the first step forward. "Ready." Dad burst through the front door first, calling my name with a fierceness that made everyone in the living room jump. "Rebecca is here," he announced to the room at large. "Your daughter and sister, who you have been allegedly waiting for, who was turned away on your doorstep like a stranger." The silence that followed was absolute. Aunt Patricia's hand froze midway to her mouth, wineglass tilted precariously. Uncle Frank stood from his armchair, confusion written across his features. My cousins Stephanie and Matthew exchanged bewildered glances. Mom guided me into the house with a protective arm around my shoulders. The warmth after so much time in the cold made my cheeks burn, or perhaps it was the weight of every eye in the room on me. "What is going on?" Aunt Patricia finally asked, looking between me, Mom, and Dad. "That is what we are all about to find out," Mom said, her voice tight with controlled anger. She turned to Eleanor, who had backed up against the wall, arms crossed defensively. "Eleanor, would you like to explain to everyone why your sister was standing outside in a blizzard with her arms full of Christmas presents while you told her she was not welcome here?" Eleanor's face flushed, but her chin came up defiantly. "She knows why she is not welcome. After years of choosing Dad over us, of skipping family events, of making excuses not to come to my wedding, she suddenly decides to show up and play the perfect daughter." "I never skipped anything I was actually invited to," I said, finding my voice at last. "And I was explicitly uninvited from your wedding, Eleanor. You sent me a text saying not to come to the reception." "Because you had already said you were too busy with your Seattle friends," she shot back. Ryan shifted uncomfortably behind her. "Ellie, that is not what you told me," he said quietly. "You said Rebecca declined because she did not want to be around your mom." Eleanor's head whipped around to glare at her husband. "Stay out of this." "No, I do not think I will," Ryan said, a steely note entering his voice. "Not anymore. This has gone on too long." Dad stepped forward. "Eleanor has been systematically lying to all of us for years, telling Rebecca she was not invited to family events while telling the rest of you she had declined. Intercepting messages, manipulating conversations, creating conflicts where none existed." Uncle Frank's bushy eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Is this true, Eleanor?" "They are exaggerating," Eleanor said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I exaggerating too?" Ryan asked. His gentle tone somehow made the question more damning. "Because I have seen the texts, Ellie. I have heard the phone calls. I have watched you delete messages before your mom could see them." Mom sank onto the couch, suddenly looking every one of her 62 years. "My God, Eleanor. Why would you do this to your sister, to our family?" Eleanor's composure finally cracked. Because it was so easy for her, she burst out, tears springing to her eyes. Everything was always so easy for Rebecca. Perfect grades without trying. MIT scholarship. Amazing job offers. Everyone always talking about how brilliant and successful she is. She pointed at me accusingly. And then Dad falls apart, and of course Saint Rebecca rushes to the rescue, sending money she did not have, being the loyal daughter, while I was stuck here picking up the pieces with Mom. She got to be the hero while I did the actual work of holding things together. The raw pain in her voice took my breath away. This was not just about the divorce or Dad. This went back much further to childhood insecurities I had never fully recognized. I did not know you felt that way, I said softly. I always admired you, Eleanor. You were my big sister, the one I looked up to. Right, she scoffed. The straight-A student looked up to the one who had to study for hours just to get B's. That is not what I admired about you, I countered. I admired your confidence, your ease with people, how you always knew what to say in social situations while I was awkward and nervous. How Mom's family always seemed to prefer you because you were outgoing and fun while I was the serious bookworm. Eleanor stared at me, momentary confusion breaking through her anger. I send money to Dad because he was drowning and I was terrified of losing him, I continued. Not to be a hero, not to take sides. I tried so many times to explain that to you, but you had already decided I was the enemy. You abandoned us, she said, but the fire had gone out of her voice. No, Eleanor, Mom said, rising again. She tried to maintain relationships with everyone during an impossible situation. You were the one who forced her to choose by making her presence conditional on her cutting ties with her father. Eleanor's shoulders slumped. You were hurt too, Mom. You cried every night. I was protecting you. That was not your job, Mom said gently. And it certainly did not require destroying your sister's place in this family. The room fell silent again as the magnitude of what had happened over the years settled over everyone. My cousins looked stunned. Aunt Patricia was openly crying. Uncle Frank had his hand over his mouth, shaking his head slowly. Today, I said, needing to understand completely when I showed up. Everyone was at the table. No one looked like they were waiting for someone else to arrive. Mom closed her eyes briefly. Eleanor told us your text. Said you were delayed until 8 or 9 tonight. We decided to go ahead with dinner rather than wait, but I set a place for you. It is still there. I looked toward the dining room and saw it then. At the far end of the table, a place setting with no one in the chair. I never sent that text, I said, though it was unnecessary at this point. I know that now, Mom whispered. Eleanor had backed herself into the corner of the room, arms wrapped around herself. Ryan stood nearby but not touching her, his expression a mixture of disappointment and concern. How many other times, I asked her directly. How many invitations did I miss because you intercepted them? How many messages did you prevent from reaching me? Eleanor's silence was answer enough. The birthday parties for the kids, Stephanie said suddenly. I always asked Mom to make sure Rebecca was invited and she said you had declined because of work. Every single time. The 4th of July cookouts, Uncle Frank added. Margaret always said you could not get away from Seattle. Last Thanksgiving, Mom said, her voice hollow. I called and left a voicemail. Eleanor said you called back and said you had other plans. I never got a voicemail, I said. I spent Thanksgiving watching movies alone with my dog. One by one, the missing pieces of years of family life were laid bare. Gatherings I had never known about. Invitations extended but intercepted, responses fabricated. A deliberate, persistent campaign to isolate me from my family while making them believe I had chosen to stay away. Eleanor finally slid down the wall to sit on the floor, sobbing into her hands. I did not mean for it to go this far, she cried. At first I was just so angry about the divorce, about you choosing Dad. But then it kept going and I could not stop. Every time I heard about your promotion or your condo or your perfect life in Seattle, I wanted you to hurt like I was hurting. Her raw honesty cracked something open in the room. The anger began to shift, not disappearing but transforming into something more complex. Grief for the years lost, shock at the extent of the deception, and underneath it all the first fragile tendril of potential healing. Ryan crossed the room to kneel beside his wife. This needs to stop now, Ellie, he said firmly, but not unkindly. All of it. The lies, the manipulation, the jealousy. Your sister is here now. Your family is here. It is time to fix what can be fixed. Mom looked between Eleanor and me, decades of pain etched in the lines around her eyes. Ryan is right. We cannot get back the years we have lost, but we can decide what happens from this moment forward. She turned to me, taking both my hands in hers. Rebecca, I failed you. I should have questioned more, pushed harder when communications seemed off. I let my own hurt after the divorce cloud my judgment, and I let Eleanor's version of events stand unchallenged because it was easier than facing the alternative. Can you ever forgive me? The lump in my throat made it hard to speak. I want to, I managed. I want us to be a family again. Dad stepped forward, then placing a hand on my shoulder. Margaret, I think we all contributed to this situation. The divorce was ugly. We both said and did things that hurt the girls. But Eleanor's actions went far beyond that. This was systematic and deliberate. He looked at Eleanor, still huddled on the floor. I understand being angry. I understand feeling overshadowed or overlooked. What I cannot understand or easily forgive is years of deliberately keeping your sister from her family. That requires more than tears and apologies. Eleanor raised her tear-stained face. I know, she whispered. I know it does. The confrontation had reached its climax, years of misunderstandings and deliberate deceptions finally exposed to the light. The truth hung in the air between us, all painful but necessary, the first step toward whatever might come next. The next hour passed in a blur of revelations and raw emotions. Mom insisted we all sit down in the living room, Christmas dinner forgotten as the family began the painful process of untangling years of lies. Uncle Frank made coffee, while Aunt Patricia quietly put away the food, the holiday celebration, transforming into something more solemn, but perhaps more important. Mom sat beside me on the couch, maintaining physical contact as if afraid I might disappear again. A hand on my arm, our shoulders touching, brief squeezes of reassurance. Dad took the armchair nearest us, a visible statement of unity that would have been unthinkable before today. Eleanor and Ryan sat across from us, Eleanor's face blotchy from crying. Ryan's expression still troubled but supportive. My cousins and their spouses created a loose circle, witnesses to a family reckoning that had been years in the making. I think Mom said once everyone had settled that we need to start with complete honesty. No more assumptions, no more filtered communications. She turned to me. Rebecca, I want to hear directly from you what these years have been like. What you thought was happening, what you felt, all of it. Taking a deep breath, I shared the story from my perspective. The gradual isolation, the increasingly cold responses, the hurt of watching family events unfold on social media that I had never been invited to attend. I described holidays spent alone or with friends, birthdays marked by unanswered messages, the growing conviction that my family had decided I was not worth including. I thought it was punishment for supporting Dad, I admitted. I thought you had decided I was disloyal and did not deserve to be part of the family anymore. Mom wiped tears away. Never, she said fiercely. I was hurt and angry after the divorce, yes. I did not understand why you maintained such close contact with your father when I felt he had destroyed our family. But I would never have cut you out of my life for that. I would, Eleanor said quietly. All eyes turned to her. At first, anyway. I was so angry when you kept sending Dad money, visiting him, calling him. It felt like a betrayal. It was not about choosing sides, I tried to explain again. Dad was at rock bottom. He needed help. I know that now, Eleanor conceded. But back then, all I could see was Mom struggling while you supported the person who had hurt her. It made me furious. That explains the initial coldness, Dad interjected, not years of systematic deception. Eleanor flinched but nodded. The deception started small. Mom would mention calling you and I would say you had told me you were too busy to talk. Or, I would delete a text before she saw it. Little things that felt justified at the time. And then Mom prompted when Eleanor fell silent. And then it became, I do not know, a way to keep control of the narrative. Rebecca was succeeding in Seattle, building this amazing career, while I was still here in Boston, working at an insurance company, living in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates. Eleanor twisted her wedding ring nervously. Every update about her life felt like a reminder of what I had not achieved. It was easier to keep her separate, to be the only daughter present at family gatherings. So you deliberately kept me away, I said, needing her to acknowledge it directly. Eleanor met my eyes for the first time. Yes, I deliberately kept you away. I intercepted invitations, deleted messages, lied about responses. I told Mom and everyone else that you were too busy or not interested in family events. I told you that you were not welcome or not invited. The bald admission hung in the air between us. Even my wedding, she continued, voice barely above a whisper. I sent that text knowing how much it would hurt you. Then I told everyone you had declined because you did not want to see Mom. Ryan shook his head. I suspected something was off, he admitted. The way she always changed the subject when I suggested reaching out to you directly. But I had no idea how far it went until recently when I overheard her deleting a voicemail from you before her mom could hear it. When was this? Mom asked sharply. 3 months ago, Ryan said. It was about Christmas. Rebecca was asking if she could join this year. Mom turned to me. I never got that message. I finally called you myself in November because it had been so long. That is why I was confused when you suddenly invited me, I realized. It seemed to come out of nowhere after years of silence. Eleanor stared at the floor. I almost intercepted that call too, but Ryan had started questioning me about the situation, and I was afraid he would tell Mom if I kept interfering. Aunt Patricia leaned forward. Eleanor, help me understand. This went beyond sibling rivalry or divorce fallout. This was calculated and sustained over years. Why? Eleanor's shoulders hunched. I do not know if I can explain it in a way that makes sense. It started with anger about the divorce, but then, Rebecca was thriving. New city, amazing job, beautiful apartment. Meanwhile, I felt stuck, resentful. The more successful she became, the more I needed to keep her away to be the good daughter who stayed, who took care of Mom, who was present for family. But I wanted to be present too, I said, my voice breaking. I tried so hard to stay connected. I know, Eleanor whispered. That made it worse somehow. If you had actually abandoned the family, I could have hated you with a clear conscience. But you kept trying, sending gifts, calling on birthdays. It made me feel terrible. And then I had to keep lying to cover the earlier lies. Mom reached over and took my hand. I failed you both, she said. I was so wrapped up in my own pain after the divorce that I did not see what was happening. I should have questioned why communication with you was always so difficult, Rebecca. I should have noticed the pattern. We all missed it, Uncle Frank said. We accepted what we were told without verification. That stops now. There was a murmur of agreement around the room. A moment of silence followed, everyone processing the painful revelations. Finally, I stood up. I brought presents, I said, gesturing to the pile by the door. They are still in their bags, probably a bit worse for wear after everything, but it is still Christmas. The simple statement broke the tension slightly. Mom smiled through her tears. Yes, it is still Christmas. I retrieved the bags and began distributing the carefully selected gifts. A hand-woven scarf for Mom in her favorite shade of blue. First edition Hemingway for Uncle Frank. Artisanal chocolates for Aunt Patricia. Thoughtful gifts for my cousins, their spouses, even small toys for the children who had been sent to play upstairs during the intense conversation. For Eleanor, I hesitated before handing over the small, carefully wrapped box. I spent weeks tracking this down, I said quietly. She unwrapped it slowly, hands trembling slightly. When she opened the box and saw the porcelain doll with auburn hair and a green dress identical to the one she had accidentally broken at age 8, she gasped. You remembered, she whispered carefully, lifting it from its tissue paper nest. Of course I remembered. You cried for days. Dad tried to find a replacement, but they had discontinued that particular design. Eleanor stared at the doll, then at me. I do not deserve this. Any of it. Maybe not, I acknowledged. But family is not about deserving. It is about choosing to love anyway. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was an opening, a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. Mom suggested we try to salvage some of the Christmas dinner, and we moved to the dining room where my place at the table still waited. The conversation was stilted at first, everyone hyper-aware of the revelations that had just occurred. But gradually, as wine was poured and food was passed, something approaching normalcy began to emerge. Uncle Frank told stories from Christmases of our childhood. Cousin Matthew's wife Allison brought their son downstairs to open his presents. Aunt Patricia asked genuine questions about my life in Seattle, listening intently to the answers. Mom kept reaching over to touch my hand as if reassuring herself I was really there. Eleanor remained subdued, speaking little, watching the interactions with an expression I could not quite read. Ryan stayed close to her, a steadying presence, as she navigated the new family dynamic she had inadvertently created through her exposure. After dinner, as everyone helped clear the table, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I want you to know," she said, voice low and intense, "that I love you. I have always loved you. The distance between us has been the greatest regret of my life, and I did not even understand the full extent of it until today." "I love you too, Mom," I said, meaning it despite everything. "We will fix this," she promised. "Not overnight, but we will. Regular calls, visits, true communication, not filtered through anyone else." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "And your father?" she continued, surprising me. "He stepped up today. For you, that matters." "He has always been there for me," I said carefully. "I see that now," she sighed. "The divorce was not entirely his fault. I was unhappy long before the business failed. That was just the breaking point. I should have been more honest about that with all of us." This admission, small but significant, felt like another crack in the wall of family mythology that had calcified over the years. Later, as the evening wound down, Eleanor approached me on the porch where I had stepped out for a moment of quiet. "I do not expect forgiveness," she said without preamble. "What I did was unforgivable." Maybe, I said, watching my breath cloud in the cold air. But unforgiven does not have to mean disconnected. We can build something new, something based on truth this time. "I would like that," she said softly. "I miss my little sister. The real one, not the imaginary rival I created in my head." "I miss my big sister too," I admitted. "The one who checked under my bed for monsters and taught me how to French braid my hair." Eleanor gave me a watery smile. "Maybe we can find those sisters again somewhere underneath all this mess." It was not a Hollywood reconciliation with swelling music and tearful embraces. It was tentative, fragile, the first green shoot pushing through scorched earth. But it was real, and for the first time in years, I felt a cautious hope for our family's future. 6 months after that fateful Christmas, I found myself back in Boston for a weekend visit. The late June weather was perfect. Warm sunshine, gentle breeze, trees in full leaf along the streets of my childhood neighborhood. I had made this trip every month since December, each visit another small step in rebuilding what had been broken. Mom and I had established a Sunday night phone call ritual never missed, regardless of time zones or work commitments. Our conversations had evolved from cautious small talk to deeper discussions about the past, present, and future. She had visited me in Seattle in March, her first time seeing my life there. Standing in my living room with its view of Puget Sound, she had cried and said, "I cannot believe I missed so much of your world." Eleanor and I were on a different path, more complicated but still moving forward. We had begun therapy sessions together, first virtually, then in person during my visits. The therapist, Dr. Winters, specialized in family estrangement and helped us navigate the complex emotions of our shared history. Reconciliation does not mean forgetting, she told us during one particularly difficult session. It means creating a new relationship that acknowledges the past while not being imprisoned by it. Eleanor had struggled to articulate the full extent of her jealousy and insecurity, the roots of which went far deeper than the divorce. "I always felt like I was living in your shadow," she admitted during our third session. "You were the smart one, the driven one, the one with potential. I was just ordinary." "I never saw you that way," I told her, genuinely shocked. "You were everything I wanted to be, confident, popular, at ease in your own skin. I spent my childhood trying to be more like you." These revelations did not instantly heal the breach between us, but they helped us understand it. We were building something different now, not the idealized closeness of childhood, but an adult relationship based on honesty and boundaries. Dad had been welcomed back into family gatherings tentatively at first, then with increasing warmth. He and Mom would never reconcile romantically, but they had found a measure of peace and even occasional friendship. At Easter dinner, I watched them laughing together over some shared memory and felt a weight lift that I had not even realized I was carrying. My professional life continued to flourish, but I had made changes there too. I negotiated a remote work arrangement that allowed me to spend more time on the East Coast. I declined a promotion that would have required 60-hour weeks, choosing instead to maintain the balance I was finally finding between career and personal connections. This particular visit to Boston coincided with Eleanor and Ryan's 5th wedding anniversary. They had invited the extended family for a backyard barbecue, a casual celebration so different from the formal wedding I had missed. As I helped Mom prepare a potato salad in her kitchen, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Mom asked, noticing my silence. "Just everything. How different things are now compared to Christmas." She nodded, understanding immediately. "Night and day, though we still have work to do." "Always," I agreed. "But it feels possible now. The work feels worth doing." Later that afternoon, as I watched Eleanor laughing with our cousins, the sunlight catching the auburn highlights in her hair, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was still hurt there, a scar that would never completely fade. But alongside it was something new, a genuine happiness at seeing her happy, free from the burden of years of deception. She caught me watching and came over, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, offering me one. "Just thinking about journeys," I replied, accepting the drink. "How you never end up quite where you expected." "No," she agreed quietly. "You certainly do not." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the family interact around us. Uncle Frank arguing good-naturedly with Dad about the proper way to grill chicken, Cousin Matthew's son toddling after a butterfly, Mom showing Aunt Patricia photos on her phone, pictures from her recent visit to Seattle. "I have been thinking about what Dr. Winters said last session," Eleanor said suddenly, "about how forgiveness is not a destination but a practice." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I want you to know that I am practicing," she said, her voice catching slightly, "every day, trying to be worthy of the second chance this family has given me." "That is all any of us can do," I said. "Practice being better than we were yesterday." "Do you think?" She hesitated. "Do you think we will ever get back what we lost?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I finally said. "We cannot get back those years or who we were then. But maybe we can build something different, something more honest, even if it is more complicated." She nodded slowly. "I would like that." That evening, as the party wound down and fireflies began to appear in the gathering dusk, I found myself sitting on the porch steps with Dad. He had aged visibly since Christmas, a health scare in February leaving him more aware of his mortality. "You know what I realized recently," he said, watching the family moving around the yard. "All those years after the divorce, I was so focused on what we had lost that I never considered what we might build instead." "What do you mean?" This, he gestured broadly. "Not a traditional family, not what we planned, but still, family. Different configuration, different rules, but still connected." His words resonated deeply with my own reflections. "We have to choose it though," I said. "Every day. It does not just happen." "No," he agreed. "The choice is what makes it valuable." As the summer evening deepened around us, I thought about the journey of the past 6 months. The painful honesty, the tentative rebuilding, the conscious choice to reconnect, despite the easier path of continued estrangement. I thought about the Christmas to come, which we had already decided would be hosted at my place in Seattle, a fresh location untainted by old memories. Family, I had learned, was not a fixed entity but a living relationship requiring nurture, boundaries, honesty, and most of all, the courage to be vulnerable again after being hurt. The wounds inflicted by those closest to us cut deepest, but they also create the opportunity for the most profound healing. As I looked around at my imperfect healing family, I realized that the greatest gift Eleanor had inadvertently given me was the knowledge that love is not about perfection or even continuous harmony. It is about the willingness to see each other clearly, flaws, insecurities, mistakes, and all, and choose connection anyway. That night before leaving for my hotel, I sent a message to our newly created family group chat, suggesting a summer gathering at a lake house halfway between Boston and Seattle. The responses came quickly: enthusiastic agreement from Mom, practical questions about dates from Dad, offers to coordinate food from Aunt Patricia. Eleanor was the last to respond. "Count us in," she wrote. "Wherever and whenever the family is together, that is where we want to be." It was not a fairy tale ending. There would be more difficult conversations, more misunderstandings to navigate, more moments when old wounds would unexpectedly reopen. But we had found our way back to the most important truth: that love requires both boundaries and openness, both accountability and forgiveness, both memory and hope. Standing at my hotel window later that night, looking out at the city lights of Boston, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The journey of healing was far from complete, but for the first time I was certain of the direction. Have you ever experienced family estrangement or had to rebuild trust after a major betrayal? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we are not alone in these complex family journeys can be incredibly healing. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that family reconciliation, while difficult, is possible with truth, boundaries, and persistent effort. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our deepest wounds become the doorways to our most authentic connections.